Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Beijing is set to host SCO summit military parade this week. World leaders including Russia and India are scheduled to attend the high-stakes meet where influence and alliances will be showcased. Kremlin confirms a high-level meeting has been scheduled with Iran on the sidelines of the SCO summit. Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to meet Iranian President Pezeshkian to discuss the situation surrounding Tehran's nuclear program. US President Donald Trump has vowed to take his legal battle over tariffs to the Supreme Court after an appeals court ruled that most of the duties he imposed on imports were illegal. President Trump has slammed the decision as incorrect on his Truth Social platform, declaring that the United States of America will win in the end. French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz have vowed to step up pressure on Russia, warning of new sanctions if President Vladimir Putin fails to meet Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky for talks, and have announced additional air defense support for Ukraine after a Russian strike on Kyiv have killed 25 people yesterday. The White House has said that President Donald Trump is still pushing for a Putin-Zelensky peace summit despite French President Emmanuel Macron warning that Trump risks being played by the Russian leader. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller has dismissed Macron's comments as absurd, insisting Trump is working steadfastly. Ukraine's military has said it struck 2 Russian oil refineries overnight, targeting facilities in Krasnodar and Syzran, with explosions and fire reported at the Krasnodar plant. The attack marks yet another escalation this war. 3 people were killed and 5 injured after protesters set fire to a regional parliament building in Makassar, Indonesia, marking the first major test for President Prabowo Subianto's government. The unrest sparked by lawmakers' pay and the death of motorbike driver hit by a police vehicle has spread from Jakarta to now across the country. EU Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has declared that Russia will not regain access to the $245.8 billion in frozen assets unless it pays reparations for the war in Ukraine. Her remarks come as Poland and the Baltic states push to use the funds for Kyiv, while France, Germany, and Belgium remain cautious over legality and future profit allocation. France is calling on the United States to allow Palestinian officials access to next month's United Nations General Assembly. Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot has said that no country should restrict participation at the UN. Let's listen into what he has said.
Je veux rappeler, suite aux annonces qui ont été faites ces dernières heures, que le siège des Nations Unies est un lieu de neutralité, c'est un sanctuaire au service de la paix, où sont résolus les conflits, où sont empêchées les guerres, et que de ce point de vue-là, une Assemblée générale des Nations Unies, fondée il y a 80 ans, par la France, entre autres pays fondateurs, ne saurait souffrir d'aucune restriction d'accès, et j'aurai l'occasion de m'exprimer à ce sujet avec mes...
Meanwhile, the United States has barred Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas from attending the UN General Assembly in New York, revoking or denying visas to about 80 Palestinian officials. The move comes as U.S. allies include France, Canada, and Australia prepare to recognize Palestinian statehood, a step Washington says should only come through direct negotiations with Israel. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Keith Vaz. He's a former UK minister, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Keith, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how does this U.S. decision to bar Palestinian officials from attending the UN General Assembly affect diplomatic relations between Washington and Palestine's allies like France?
It's very regrettable, very regrettable. I think it will create rift between the allies and the President of the United States. But as we know, President Trump does tend to make up diplomacy on the hoof. So there's no reason to believe that they won't all be friends again very soon. But this is, in a sense, a line in the sand. There's no point in having these discussions without the presence of President Abbas. And I think there's no point in also criticizing allies like France, Britain, and Germany when they are essential to the success of the peace process. So let's hope that diplomacy will prevail and that President Abbas will be allowed to attend a conference that's going to affect himself and his people, which is a sensible thing to do in all the circumstances.
And Keith, now how could such restrictions influence future negotiations and the legitimacy of this UN summit for Palestine?
Well, I think it's a complete waste of time. Unless you allow the Palestinians to participate in what is going on, it is a complete waste of time to have these discussions. It's rather like Alaska, inviting President Putin over, hoping there's going to be some kind of agreement, and then nothing happening. So I think it is essential that they should be allowed in. The rift is never permanent with Donald Trump. So long as you're very nice to him and nominate him for the Nobel Prize, he's very happy. But the key thing is making sure there is progress with these talks, which I hope will happen. And I hope you'll give in and allow the Palestinians to attend. How can you have a conference on the Middle East without the Palestinians? It's absolutely absurd.
Right, and we cannot know exactly why President Trump decided to take such kind of decision, but don't you think that it contradicts his want or his goal to achieve Nobel Prize by stopping Palestine and Israel come to a peace deal?
Well, can I just say to you, please ring me up and have me on your program if Donald Trump ever gets the Nobel Prize for Peace. I don't think it's ever going to happen. And if this is why he's doing it, I think it's a waste of time. You can only get the Nobel Prize for Peace if you promote peace rather than war. Bombing Iran, having discussions without solutions is not the way. I think he's on a pathway for a Nobel Peace Prize. If he can get Zelensky and Putin in the same room, if he can get Abbas and Netanyahu in the same room, I think I will nominate him for the Nobel Prize for Peace. Forget about anyone else. I'll do it. But unless those two things happen, I'm afraid he is not going to get his Nobel Prize for Peace.
Right. We'll keep that in mind. Thank you very much, Keith, for joining us and sharing your insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, in latest developments, the Russian Defense Ministry has claimed that Russia has downed 20 Ukrainian drones, including 18 over Crimea. It has also claimed to have taken control of a village in eastern Ukraine. This has come after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused that Moscow had used preparation time for a meeting of leaders of both countries to launch new attacks on Ukraine. Both Russia and Ukraine have been accusing each other of escalating tensions by launching fresh attacks. Amidst the talks between President Putin and President Zelensky, the front lines remain active. Meanwhile, in Europe, France is set to table new proposals for sanctions against Russia during an informal gathering of EU foreign ministers in Copenhagen. President of European Commission von der Leyen has also talked about the new steps regarding handling of frozen Russian assets. These developments cast a new shadow on the prospects of the meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky. Vice President of European Commission Kaja Kallas has also talked about frozen Russian assets. Let's listen into what she has said.
We see that Russia does not want peace, although there are a lot of diplomatic efforts made to bring Zelensky and Russia to the table. We can't possibly imagine that, if there is ceasefire or a peace deal, that these assets are given back to Russia if they haven't paid for the reparations.
Now for this discussion, we go back to Keith Vaz. He's a former UK minister, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Keith, for staying with us. Now, what do you think, in what ways might ongoing European Union sanctions and asset freezes influence both the conflict dynamics and diplomatic negotiations?
Where I agree with Ursula von der Leyen is there have been efforts for peace between these two countries. Where I disagree with her is that I think the EU has done little. What EU leaders should be doing is having their own stuff with President Putin and President Zelensky. If he doesn't need to meet President Zelensky on his own, then why not take along Macron and Starmer and Chancellor Merkel and Ursula von der Leyen and have a proper summit meeting, if that's what it takes. But I think both the bombings and the freezing of assets, the bombing of Ukraine and the freezing of Russian assets, is not going to lead to any successful conclusion. The way to take the Alaska summit forward is for another meeting. And it should include European leaders, but it should be done quickly as possible.
And what do you think, what role can the European play in balancing sanctions and diplomatic efforts to de-escalate tensions between Russia and Ukraine now?
I don't think I think freezing of assets is not de-escalating. Freezing of assets is escalating the tensions between the two countries. What is essential is that after Alaska, if we want Alaska to work, there should be a meaningful discussion between President Zelensky and President Putin. If the European leaders have to be involved, I think they do, then it should take place in Paris and London or Bonn or Berlin. And this is how you follow up on the success of the summit meeting at Alaska. It's not just meetings, it's what happens afterwards. And because there was no agenda for Alaska, that's why there's no conclusion. So I hope very much that that is what will happen. Not to freeze, not to bomb, but to meet. That's the way to take these things forward.
And Keith, going back to President Trump's office, saying that like they were accused of not the stalled talks between Putin and Zelensky, but now they have said that no, it's not stalled and they are ongoing, but it's not in the public. What do you think about that? Do you think it's stalled or it's just not in the public?
It's only stalled because nobody knows how to take this next step. Why doesn't the UN do it if nobody else is prepared to do it? I mean, the UN has failed to take any effective action to bring people to the negotiating table. Somebody has to bring the European leaders together with President Putin. If that happens, then there's going to be success. But without it, I'm afraid, all the achievements of Alaska are going to go by the way.
Thank you very much, Keith Vaz, for joining us and sharing your insight as a former UK minister. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Asia. At least 3 people were killed by a fire allegedly started by protesters at the Makassar City Council in South Sulawesi after rallies erupted on Friday across the country, triggered by the killing of an 21-year-old ride-hailing driver, Afan Kurniawan, being run over by a police tactical vehicle the day prior. 2 of the victims were staff of the council and another was a civil servant. Protests in Makassar, the biggest city in the eastern island of Sulawesi, descended into chaos outside the provincial and local city council buildings, which were both set on fire as demonstrators hurled rocks and Molotov cocktails. The protests marked the largest and most violent since Prabowo Subianto took office. Testing his leadership less than a year into his presidency, he launched an investigation and visited the driver's family. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you very much, Ross, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how did the violent protests that has erupted in Indonesia reflect broader challenges to current President Prabowo's leadership and current governance in Indonesia?
as I said here on NewsX about 24 hours ago, talking about this topic, President Prabowo has to be very careful that this doesn't get out of hand. Now, unfortunately, in the last 24 hours, this has gotten out of hand with very violent riots spreading far away from the capital, Jakarta, and there's been deaths now, and you know that is angering the public even more. And where it's going to go from here is very much an unknown. You know, the president is facing a public relations problem. One, that some of his policy decisions have been made to benefit senior political leaders around him, members of the Indonesian parliament, big business. And the results of his policies, even though he's only been in office for less than a year, are not trickling down to the common people. And he's really struggling to prove that's not the case, but that's certainly the growing perception. And then the way the police have handled the riots, you know, unfortunately this happens in a lot of places around the world where there's a rally or a protest, people are very emotional, it gets a bit out of hand, and police respond with a level of violence that only inflames the situation further. It also seems that in this situation that the police, frankly, are just not well trained to handle these kinds of situations, and thus it gets out of hand.
And yes, last time we talked, and then now after 24 hours, it has become more and more aggressive, it seems like. So what impact might these events have on Indonesia's political stability, also public trust in law enforcement, according to you?
Certainly, it's a political crisis at the moment. Now, it might go away quickly. He met with the family of the rideshare victim who died at the hands of the police, which you mentioned, and that might help ameliorate some of that anger. But how many more days this will go on at the moment, it's simply not known. And again, people are angry. Prabowo was elected with nearly 59% of the vote, which frankly is a extraordinarily high vote share to get. It was enormous support in last year's election, but there's obviously a segment of society that is really unhappy with his policy decisions up to through this date, nearly a year into his term, and he really has to do something to change those perceptions and restore his image. And as you mentioned, there's this issue of public trust in institutions, which has not been helped by some of his policy decisions that haven't worked, or there's been allegations of corruption. One of his most prominent programs was a school lunch program, which has not gone well at all. And again, it just erodes public trust in institutions.
Right. Thank you very much, Ross Feingold, for giving that insight and sharing your expertise as a political analyst. Now we move on. The 2025 Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit has officially kicked off in Tianjin, China. The summit focuses on regional security, counter-terrorism, trade, energy, digital cooperation, and food security. Cyber defense, artificial intelligence, and the formal membership of Belarus are also on the key topics. Over 20 world leaders and 10 international organizations are expected to attend, making this the largest SCO summit ever. Russian President Vladimir Putin has spoke ahead of the summit, taking a firm stance against discriminatory sanctions imposed by the US and EU. President Putin said Russia and China share a common position on sanctions that hinder global development. He noted that Russia-China bilateral trade has grown by about US $100 billion since 2021, and that trade is almost completely conducted in rubles and yuan. Putin has also highlighted China as Russia's leading importer of oil and gas. This is the largest SCO summit ever, hosting leaders including Xi Jinping, India's Narendra Modi, Russia's Vladimir Putin, and other world leaders. Other leaders present include Nepal's KP Sharma Oli, Maldives' President Mohammad Muizzu, and Cambodia's Hun Manet. The summit aims to strengthen SCO's role in stability and regional cooperations. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you very much, Ross, for staying with us. Now, how does this expanding role of the SCO highlighted by its largest ever summit reflect shifting geopolitical alliances to from Western-dominated global institutions?
There's certainly a lot of speculation about that in the recent days leading up to the SCO meeting. It's easy to say that President Trump's decisions are changing the world order or upsetting the Western or US-led world order. It's damaging institutions where the US previously had leadership, most notably on trade, but potentially on security as well. I think there's been a bit of a rush to make those conclusions. The SCO, it's not a trade agreement. It's not really a collective security agreement either. It's basically a meeting where a bunch of leaders get together once a year. Not even all the leaders always attend. Modi hasn't attended every single meeting of the SCO. And they issue a communique and they talk about how there needs to be a multipolar world. But when it comes to substantive outcomes from the SCO, I'd encourage the audience to pay attention to that. Or another way to look at it is the lack of substantive outcomes. They can make whatever statements they want, but how this organization will really function collectively really remains to be seen.
Yes, although they have, yes, Ross, I agree with you. Although they have been in place for about 25 years, we don't know much of outcomes or substantial outcomes that have come out of it. So what do you think is challenging for them to come to a conclusion or a concession like that?
The interesting thing there is that there's a number of options to go to. There's various trade agreements, the multilateral trade agreements that some of these participating countries are part of. There's multilateral financial institutions. For example, there's the infrastructure bank that China helped launch and is based in Beijing that plays a role, and a lot of countries participate in it, but it's still led by China, and it's definitely not an SCO initiative. So it's not clear where these countries really want to go if they want to develop alternatives to the Western or US-led international order and international institutions. And sometimes, frankly, I don't think they want to be left out. Some of these countries that are attending the SCO meeting, they still want funding if they need it from organizations like the World Bank or IMF. They still need to participate in the United Nations and other UN-affiliated organizations as well. And of course, they're always going to engage with the European Union, even if they're mad at the United States. A lot of these countries want to engage with the EU. And then the members from ASEAN who are attending, they have ASEAN institutions to participate in. So again, we're back to that core issue. It's easy to get together once a year and talk and criticize the West or say there needs to be multipolarity. But when it comes to a substantive reason for this organization to exist, that still remains to be seen.
And lastly, what do you think, what are the implications of Russia and China increasing bilateral trade in rubles and yuan?
Of course, they're trying to get away from the use of the US dollar, so they're trying to conduct as much trade as possible in alternative currencies, whether that's rubles, the yuan, or some future digital currency or cryptocurrencies. But at the moment, there's so much talk about that, not just involving Russia and China, but other parts of the world as well. And it's so difficult to move away from the US dollar. Is there going to be more non-US dollar trade in the future? Will more trade be settled in currencies other than the US dollar? Of course, but the amounts we're talking about versus the total volume of international trade, it's so small. This will be a very, very slow process. And whether or not these countries could really work together, can they trust each other, for example, that also is an unknown.
Yes, we will be eyeing that. Thank you very much, Ross Feingold, for joining us and sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, Thailand is facing fresh political uncertainty after the Constitutional Court dismissed Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra on Friday over an ethics violation linked to a leaked phone call with Cambodia's Senate President Hun Sen. Let's listen in to what the Prime Minister had to say on the court ruling.
ค่ะคำตัดสินของศาลในวันนี้นะคะก็เป็นอีกครั้งหนึ่งค่ะที่ทำให้เกิดการเปลี่ยนแปลงทางการเมืองอย่างฉับพลันดิฉันต้องขอบพระคุณพี่น้องประชาชนทุกท่านที่ได้ให้โอกาสดิฉันทำงานเพื่อประเทศชาติมาเกือบ1 ปีเต็มดิฉันมีความภาคภูมิใจที่ได้มาอยู่ตรงนี้ได้ทำเพื่อประเทศชาตินำประสบแน่นอนค่ะว่ามีส่วนไหนที่ดิฉันจะทำเพื่อช่วยประเทศชาติให้ดีขึ้นได้ไม่ว่าเล็กหรือใหญ่ดิฉันก็ยินดีที่จะทำทั้งนั้นแน่นอนค่ะ
Let's now also listen to a few Thai citizens on how they are reacting to this court's decision.
รู้สึกเสียใจอะค่ะท่านอยู่นี่ก็เขาก็ทำงานดีนะค่ะค้าขายก็เริ่มกระเตื้องขึ้นก็กังวลว่าถ้าเกิดว่าไม่ถ้าเอาพรรคอื่นเข้ามาอย่างเงี้ยโครงการที่ว่าไอ้นี่กันไปแล้วมันจะไม่บาลานซ์เหมือนเก่าอะค่ะ
ดีใจครับเพราะว่าตั้งแต่เป็นนายกมานี่ไม่มีอะไรดีขึ้นมาเลยเศรษฐกิจก็แย่เงินทองหาลำบากคนเดือดร้อน
Following this, Paetongtarn's ruling Pheu Thai alliance has sought to project unity, while the Bum Jai Thai party led by Anutin Charnvirakul has been shuttling between parties and claims it already has enough support to form a government. Anutin has also pledged to call an election within 4 months. Meanwhile, the opposition People's Party, the largest bloc in parliament and successor to the reformist, moved forward. He has said that it will not join any coalition but could support parties that commit to an early election and constitutional reform. Acting Prime Minister Phuntham Waichayachai has also expressed confidence that Pheu Thai can still rally allies, but no date has been set for a parliamentary vote to elect the next Prime Minister. Now for this discussion, we go back to Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you very much, Ross, for staying with us. Now, how does this dismissal of Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra impact on the influential Shinawatra family and their reputation?
It looks like for now that the Shinawatra family is still going to remain a power broker in Thai politics. As long as Thaksin Shinawatra is still alive and still healthy, he's going to continue to play a role, whether Paetongtarn, his daughter, wants to do that over the long term as well after she's been removed as prime minister. That remains to be seen. But as long as he is still on the scene, then it's clear that he's going to play a role, especially because his party, the Pheu Thai party, has so many seats in the parliament that they're going to play a major role in the coalition's discussions about trying to find another prime minister so that they could avoid a snap election.
Thank you very much, Ross, for staying with us and sharing your insight as a political analyst. Joined us live from Taipei. Now we move on. As per the reports, a car crashed into a crowd in Erupt, northern France, early Saturday, killing 1 and injuring 5. After an altercation at a wine bar, the prosecutor Remy Countin has said that a person allegedly went to fetch the vehicle and deliberately reversed at high speed into the crowd outside the establishment. He added that 2 people were in critical condition. Well, this is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.